All right, we're back. And
We are back.
yeah, we're not composed at the moment. Anyway, we got round 3 coming up here. We're actually going to go back to running a normal individual event. We have deck lists and things like that. We're going to be watching Andrew Kinzer versus Connor Mullaly, Living End versus kind of new look Jund with some Streets of New Capenna cards that are definitely going to play a role in the matchup. So when the deck lists are ready, we'll go ahead and pop them up. But yeah, okay, here we go. Andrew Kinzer. So new cards. We have Ziotor's Proving Ground, okay, but we have Riveter's Charm. So that's a new part of the uncommon charm cycle. And this one of the modes is Wipe the Graveyard.
Yeah, that seems to matter a lot more and more in these modern matchups we keep seeing. This Jund deck, Jund is a deck that's been around since Modern's inception, a fan favorite, beloved by many, and cards like Luris made cards like Liliana of the Veil kind of unavailable over the recent years. So it's nice to see it kind of coming back with new tools, finally getting a little bit of a fresh look after kind of years of having the same cards. We still got the marquee Thoughtseize as Liliana's and Tarmogoyfs, but very upgraded creature suite here, and even inclusive cards like Fury and, like you said, Riveteer's Charm, some Streets of New Capenna action going on. You'll love to see it.
That's right. And Dauthi Voidwalkers. So multiple sets of Graveyard Hate in the main, plus some more on the board. Let's go ahead and look at Connor Mullaly's Living End deck. This deck is a mainstay on the series. And I don't know that we're seeing any recent developments here. Probably no Streets of New Capenna cards. So no increase. We got to get another Streets of New Capenna card this weekend. We have to.
I think we're going to do better than 6. I think
we cannot have your just off the cuff prediction be spot on accurate. That is unacceptable.
I am Rain Man, Joe.
If I would have known this would happen, I would have gone and registered a Streets New Capenna sealed deck just to blow apart your prediction, but I didn't know.
That is extremely toxic, Joe. I don't need this from you.
All right, so if the players are ready, here we go. Andrew Kinzer on the play with Jund.
And Jund on the play. No Thoughtseize on turn 1. I wonder how much Andrew knows about this matchup, as Connor actually going to be the first one to look at the other player's hand using a copy of Grief, pitching a hard to use Living in there before a land's even played. And look at
all right, so we see Forest, Fatal Push. I think that's Riveter's Charm. How do people already have foil alternate arts of cards that have been printed for like a day and a half? I don't understand.
There's an NRG booth, Joe. You can just buy cards right there.
I suppose that's true. Wrenn and Six, Liliana, Thoughtseize. So no third land yet, but a couple turns to draw it.
What do you think of this no Thoughtseize on turn 1 when you have a Wrenn and Six you could potentially want to play on turn 2?
Well, that's a good point. So the Wrenn and Six does cover the land drop. And with the Lily, yeah, and you know what? You're right. Andrew has his mana, kind of spent for the next several turns.
Well, we'll see exactly how that plays out. Could be potentially fetching a Triumph here, just trying to make the mana work, because that Forest is like really awkward.
I mean, now that Jund has a Triumph, you got to show it off, right?
There it is. 2 New Capenna cards in one turn there, Joe. How about that? The Proving Ground.
You would never know it, as this is also like an extended art, altered, modified.
How much you liked the reskin art stuff for different other IPs.
I mean, in this particular case, since I don't even know what the Ziotor Proving Ground regular art looks like, I guess it's not actually hurting me at all. Yeah. But in fact, that could be the regular art for all I know.
Either way, Grief going to take care of the card that does exile Connor Lily's graveyard. Easily the most problematic. Kind of frustrating, I'm sure, to have to play against a main deck graveyard hate, basically, out of the Jund deck. But fortunately for Connor, not a lot of other exciting things going on. Discard is going to slow Connor down, but we didn't see any form of a clock. So Inquisition, the draw off the top of the library, going to be cast prior to the Thoughtseize. Going to take a look at Brazen Borrower, Violent Outburst, and the Waker of Waves. Believe Violent Outburst or Brazen Borrower are the only 2 that you can select. Mm-hmm. And hard not to take the Violent Outburst here. Just kind of cut Connor off of Living End effects entirely here, and that looks to be the card selected based on pinpointing, if I had to guess.
Yep. So the sequencing here for Andrew is, I guess, going to be land number 2, next turn, Wrenn and Six, pick up a land, replay it, and then potentially cast another discard spell. Although, at that point, I guess there's one more turn where discard is live. After that, Connor will just play any Cascade stuff that he finds, and he did find one. So Andrew is going to be... I mean, it'd be understandable if the Thoughtseizes isn't cast this turn, but it very much needs to be.
I think it needs to be, and I would be.
Yeah.
I mean, life total doesn't matter that much. Typically, if Living End's doing its thing, it's going to get so far ahead on card advantage that couple extra points of life doesn't matter too much. I think I would be pretty surprised not to see Andrew fetch shock and cast the Thoughtseize here.
Yeah. I mean, it's really
And
not
that
going to do any good later in the game.
correct. And that looks to
Although,
be the case here. We'll see if Connor wants to do any kind of Brazen Borrower shenanigans in response. Don't think you should, as you picked up that Shardless Agent that Andrew is almost certainly going to select with his copy of Thoughtseize. Going to grab a Swamp here, maybe make the mana a little bit better. Does still allow us to cast things like Dauthi Voidwalker that are drawn off the top. Basically only Seasoned Pyromancer, the only real consideration for grabbing a Shockland there, I think.
all right, Thoughtseize it is, and I believe the draw was Shardless Agent, which Andrew will now understand and realize and discard.
Can't have that one happening. Absolutely
Nope.
not. Now that Waker Wave's going to provide Connor a little bit of selection when it is cycled or kind of pseudo cycled at the end of turn here. So 2 looks, at least I guess 3 looks with the draw step at a turn 3 cascade effect, despite 2 pieces of interaction. So we'll see what we can find here. Subtlety, Curator of Mysteries, the 2 cards that we're looking at here.
Okay, well, that's not going to really help at the moment. The door is open here. It's not there, though. So 2 gone, doesn't find one of the other 6. And so now we're going to play real game. And the longer that goes, the more it favors Andrew, as his Planeswalkers can really get to work.
Yeah, what is a real game, Joe? What is the context of a Living End matchup that is a real game?
A real game is where the Living End player doesn't put 20 power. Basically, it's what happened in the Battle of Wits match.
Okay.
Not the inverse. Because I feel like those 2 games, Living End went off on turn 3 or 4 both games. This one's going to last a little bit longer. Although I guess it's hard to have a real game where Jund doesn't win.
And that's what I was thinking. Is like, is it a real game or is that just Jund winning? I mean, I guess you could just try to cast some Curator Mysteries and hope that's good enough. Maybe play the Street Wraith as, whatever, a 5-mana unblockable. I don't even know if you have black mana. Force Negation, a nice pickup, though, for Andrew, for Connor, especially if he finds an instant speed way to get Living End on the stack, something like the copy of Violent Outburst, which has already been selected to be discarded. You can force on their turn. And after the Living End effect, and that is one of the reasons Living End has seen a large resurgence as Sunken Ruins played for turn.
So not all the Living End decks play the filter lands, but there we see it for Connor. I think it's called Sunken Ruins. So that actually will allow him to cast something like Street Wraith or Architects of Will if he chooses. And you're right, there is Swamp Walk. So that could take some chunks out of these Planeswalkers, but Connor's going to have to get something going. As Wrenn and Six is, it's on its way.
Absolutely. My understanding is that typically you want to play like either a Sunken Ruins or a Urborg in order to cast like your Griefs is typically the one that comes up, is my understanding. You can also suspend Living End, whatever. There's a couple double black things, but you need a land that gives you 2 black from 1 land. And I guess Sunken Ruins is probably the assumed to be best one, given that is what Connor's playing here. At least that's what Connor thinks is the best. Now that Brazen Borrower does threaten to bounce this Wrenn and Six to keep like something like a Retraced Riveteer's Charm from locking him out of the game. But I'm sure that's not necessarily what he's really looking to do, as another Curator of Mysteries is picked up off the top of the library. Going to quickly cycle that one, looking for a Living End effect. Does he find one? Looks like land past the turn. Probably not, at least not Shardless Agent.
Yeah. Okay. So generally, like Liliana plussing isn't going to be too valuable against a deck like Living End that's just trying to put creatures in the graveyard anyway. But when they're kind of stuck at this point, I feel like, grinding the excess cards out of the hand. I mean, there's counters and there's, if you can get them empty-handed, then, you're feeling pretty comfortable. As there are interactive spells in these decks, like the Brazen Borrower you're talking about, like the Force Negation. Just clearing that stuff out of the way is valuable at some point. But yeah, maybe Andrew is just comfortable sitting here with the Wrenn and Six and some, bolts removal in hand and just, I don't know. I mean, I guess this is Jund rushing to victory. This is as fast as they go.
Yeah, this is the lightning speed, Joe. You see, the Fatal Push and Lightning Bolt's not terribly good in this particular matchup. Cards that you're not really going to see. You're looking for cards like Tarmogoyf or here Ragavan, an excellent pickup as well. Accelerate the mana, get a little bit of a clock going. So we plus Wrenn, pick up our land, make our land drop once again. A little bit of card advantage coming, but the card advantage for Living End comes in one big burst when that powerful card is put onto the stack, as here is a dashed Ragavan.
Yeah,
See if
and that
Connor
gets
wants to
in
let that
there.
one connect. He does.
No opposition, and we'll see. That can flip over something relevant. I mean, it's possible, I guess, that a creature gets hard cast out. Whoa!
How about Grief? How about that one, Joe?
Is that the best possible flip?
I think that's probably the best possible flip. Yeah, Joe. I think
Yeah.
that was real good. That's
Well,
a really
Andrew can
good one.
skip the Liliana decision for this turn.
Well, Andrew knows about a Brazen Borrower. How awkward is it to cast the Grief and then with like, it on the stack, you could do something like just bounce it and then you have to take the Grief.
That's
right?
fair. That's fair.
So like you may not even want to cast it, even if it's the best hit, just because Connor does have his copy of Sunken Ruins already in play. And it looks like it is not being cast. And here comes a Waker of Waves cycle on the end step. Looks like a land. Didn't get a good look. Maybe an Otawara.
I think it is
that
Otawara.
One can do bounce the Wrenn as well. Maybe save that copy of Brazen Borrower. Looks like the Otawara is selected. And we'll see if Connor wants to do anything else on end step. Maybe something like a Brazen Borrower.
No.
Not quite yet, says Connor.
This is being pretty, aggressive with mana, just not using it when the opportunity's there. So I don't know exactly.
Another land picked off the top from Connor. We've seen 2 cascade effects so far. Have not been the top of the deck not been very kind to Connor since those 2 disruptive interaction spells. And this is kind of the power of Jund. When you can disrupt their hand a little bit with a couple disruption spells and get some kind of snowballing advantage, like Wrenn and Six, Liliana the Veil going. This is exactly where Jund wants to be. But the power of Living End comes off the top of the library. And that's, I think, what makes it maybe a little bit trickier for this Jund deck to handle, and why we see tools like Riveter's Charm be put into the Jund deck and help kind of mitigate some of that potential for being top decked out of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Riveter's Charm, we haven't really talked about the other modes. It can make your opponent sacrifice their most mana-intensive creature or planeswalker, I believe, or it can flip the top 3 cards of your deck.
There we go. Get it on screen here. Sacrifice the creature or planeswalker, the highest converted or mana value. I'm sorry, it's now mana value.
So here is the petty theft.
The top 3.
Maybe Connor's just trying to preserve having Misty Rainforest on the board. I'm surprised that didn't happen at the end of Andrew's turn instead of doing it now, but the effect is the same, I guess.
I think if Connor doesn't have a 6th land and he draws Violent Outburst, he can't hard cast a Force of Negation. He still needs to pitch cast it. So he needed to wait until he had his 6th mana source in order to be able to draw Violent Outburst, be able to cast that with the Force backup so that he doesn't get something like Riveteer's Charmed in response.
All right. Well, so the Wrenn 6 is going to have to start over if Andrew chooses to redeploy it.
Well, now, Andrew knows there's a Force of Negation in Connor's hand still, right? Like, I think that was revealed off of the discard effects. I wonder if it's time for Andrew to consider playing that Liliana the Veil that's in his hand. You mentioned earlier you like being able to cut down the cards, especially when Connor's not doing a whole lot of cycling. These are cards, clearly, that, you can use to interact. I think it is probably... at least it does further your game plan in order to get your Liliana the Veil going. Even if it's not the most exciting thing in the world, it's better probably than not playing it. But Andrew, of course, seems very interested in keeping a lot of his mana open on Connor's turn, maybe representing something like an additional copy of Riveter's Charm. We've seen varying numbers in those. Yeah,
but even if you were representing Riveter's Charm, you would also want to play into the Force of Negation with your Planeswalkers so that it gets used up, because Liliana is certainly great at, whether you counter it or not, you're going to lose your Force of Negation eventually.
That's true. And it looks like Andrew has come to the same conclusion as here comes Liliana of the Veil. Powerful Planeswalker from Innistrad. Hasn't seen this one in a while. This is a card people were bemoaning its absence from Modern during the era of the Reign of Lurrus, the Dream Den. 1 black Planeswalker. Each player discards a card. Not normally the best thing in the against Living End, as they like to discard their creatures anyway. But if they have no creatures they want to discard in the yard, it actually can be pretty potent. It does make players sacrifice a creature and can make them sacrifice all their permanents as an ultimate as well.
Okay, so Otawara is the discard here. Misty Rainforest is cracked to find a land, and Connor will untap with just the Force of Negation left.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one you want, right? Like, he's put himself in a position to get lucky, right? Like, that's a lot of what Magic is. A lot of Magic is finagling the game to give yourself the most time and the most opportunities to get lucky. So Connor, once again, is in a spot where if he untaps and he draws an effect, some way, card with Cascade that can put a living end on the stack, he has a Force of Negation backup despite all this interaction. Looks like an additional copy of Force of Negation was picked up. That should buy him at least one more turn, being able to discard that to Liliana the Veil and have the same opportunity in the following turn. But the door is closing as there's now 2 Planeswalkers for Andrew accumulating advantages.
Yep. But you're right. We're still at the point where if Connor is able to fire off the living end, Andrew is nowhere close to being able to deal with the board, despite all the cards he has in his hand. Wrenn and Six does combine with Liliana to force Connor to discard a card. We see the Force Negation drop. So now Andrew doesn't know the card in Connor's hand.
I mean, what do you think it is, right? If Force Negation is discarded, what do you think that card is?
Maybe
here
you
comes
could
a Ragavan coming across.
Yeah. Maybe you could think it's a Waker Waves or something, but
Breeding Pool, not a hit. Connor says, thank you for getting that one off the top of my library. Not what I want to see. I'm looking at a handful of looks to be removal spells. Maybe a copy of Besaju among the mix. Could be considering trying to start Besajuing some of Connor's lands. Try to cut him off a little bit of mana. As here comes Brazen Borrower from the Adventure Zone. Going to go ahead and cast that one. Looks like Shardless Agent to pick up, if I got a good look correctly. Lightning Bolt going to take care of that Brazen Borrower. Not doing a lot else. Going to go ahead and get rid of that one. And it's actually going to help because here comes a Shardless Agent in second main. We're getting that one right back. I missed my Brazen Borrower. Can I have that back, please?
Can Living End recover from half a dozen Planeswalker activations from Andrew? And I think the answer is yes. And here is the
charm response. And the Force of Negation from Connor that he kept in his hand is going to counter that. It looks like Andrew staring at a pile of cards that do not exile the graveyard. The Riveter's Charm here looks like it may not be good enough. And it is going to go ahead and get exiled. Living End going to resolve, bringing back a whole slew of creatures, some of which have text, some of which do not. And we'll see how Andrew can manage this now extremely impressive board state from Connor Mullaly.
Well, Andrew is getting back, nothing. All right. And that's it.
Andrew's picking up his permanents. I think he has realized the density of creatures in the graveyard is a little much for the Liliana sacrifice. And we're going to move on to game number 2. You know, Joe, if you're playing a Jund deck, right, and traditionally, I will speak to this, the Living End versus Jund has been really bad for Jund in the past. Now, you're playing a Jund deck that has all kinds of new cards in it, all kinds of fancy new stuff, and you've drawn both copies of your main deck card that exiles the graveyard, and you lose the match anyway. I don't think that speaks that the matchup's gotten much better over the years.
No, that was tough. I mean, Connor did set that up well, time things out, just basically sit there for as long as he could, and was rewarded when that Cascade spell came off right at the end. So we'll go ahead and look at the sideboards here and see how the players improve. We know that Andrew has unlicensed Hearst to come in alongside his Dauthi Voidwalkers and Riverwinder Charms. So that brings him up to at least 6 graveyard cards. He's got Chalice of the Voids. He's
got a slew. He's got Ashiok.
He's got Endurance. There is
the whole Christmas list.
Yeah,
we brought it all.
A lot. There's a lot here, which is good because there are a handful of cards in the main deck that want no part of these matchups.
Yeah, Fatal Push wasn't doing it for you in that game, Joe?
Not so much.
Might want to get some of those out of the deck.
Fury seems pretty crappy.
Yeah.
Kroxa, I guess, is okay.
It's between those and Lightning Bolts, I think, for the next cards. Maybe Terminates probably need to get out of the card as well. Not a lot of the removal spells are not really where you want to be in this matchup, I think, but there is no shortage of good sideboard options for Andrew and plenty of still good main deck options. We still have these Dauthis with the Riveter's Charms, lots of interactions. So it's clear that Andrew has this matchup on his radar and is respecting it with his deck building. We'll see if that pays off in these sideboard games. All
right, so Connor with Living End is going to need to defend against a variety of things here. Certainly has some options. Foundation Breakers. Late Sanctity is going to work. That will stop some of the hatred. It will not stop the Voidwalkers. The Riveter's Charm, I believe, is exile a player's graveyard, so I think that Leyline will stop that. Hearst will work. Foundation Breaker or Force of Vigor will have to be deployed, or Inquisition. I guess there's a variety of options here. The problem for Connor is that Andrew's got a variety of graveyard hate that need different answers. So
Exactly.
there's no
No, you're right.
clean
And there's
way
some
to
main
beat
deck
it.
cards like Brazen Borrower that can help with that. But
Yeah.
that's why you see this diversity. A lot of times in Magic, you just play the best option, right? That's what you want to do when you're talking about approaching a matchup. Play the best sideboard card. But Andrew actually has a wide variety, like two of a bunch of different card types, and that makes sideboarding as living in incredibly difficult.
Yeah, no colossal sky turtles in this build. At least I don't see them, which I feel like that's become kind of an accepted part of these decks. I don't see any copies here, so maybe this is a little bit older list.
Could be.
Or
I don't know if there's
any,
merit
any
to maybe playing Brazen Borrower over it, because I think they
yeah,
kind of do the same thing with the 2 mana
yeah.
boomerang effect. So I don't know what the argument there actually is, but Connor looks to be reaching for Brazen Borrower instead.
No Streets and New Capenna cards, unfortunately.
Just sad.
So we'll have to wait another match or another round or two to knock you out of being perfectly correct on that. Anyway, we're going to let those players finish up sideboarding. If you're enjoying the coverage, we're in round 3. We've got all day to come. 9 rounds of Swiss plus top 8, all being played out today. It's going to be a long day. We'll be here with you the whole way through. If you're enjoying the coverage, give us a follow. We did hit Norman's owner, Nerve Rage owner Norman Cohen's requested 10 followers at round yesterday. If we can do better than that, that's great. If we can do less, I won't complain. Doesn't matter to me either way.
I'll complain, Joe. I'll do all the complaining for you. I'm going to take Twitter by storm if we do not do at least 10 followers per
There you
round.
go. You have been threatened.
I'm coming for you, Twitch chat. We need follows. We need, I guess we don't need subscriptions, but subscriptions would be nice if you want to support the channel, you want to support the coverage. We appreciate you being here no matter what, watching some paper magic happen. And honestly, this is a little bit of a relic of a matchup. And we've seen a few of those this weekend. We've seen a lot of old archetypes in Modern kind of coming back with a lot of new tools. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about Eternal formats like Modern, like Legacy, that have the potential to have these impactful cards be injected in through various different methods, standard sets, even like some of the supplementary sets. We get to see these old matchups come back with new context and kind of see how things have changed, see what Magic looks like, but still get a taste of nostalgia.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so Andrew, despite a precarious position, but being like arguably ahead for most of that game, does fall apart right at the end to the Shardless Agent plus Force Negation and mulligan here. Now, mulling in sideboard games when you have more than half a dozen premium hate cards makes a lot of sense to me. I wouldn't want to keep a 7-card hand with no graveyard hate here unless it was just excellent.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think if game one is to be believed, this matchup is very much not about card advantage. You need very specific cards that completely shut down Connor's plan, because you can have, every land drop in the world and you're going to die with 7 cards in hand, because as soon as Living gets to do its thing, all those cards that went to the graveyard come back into play, and it's just an overwhelming amount of card advantage baked into one single card. And that's the power of Living. That's the power of combo decks. They kind of eschew trying to win any kind of attrition games via card advantage for these large bursts of card advantage in one fell swoop. So I think trying to battle on like the Wrenn Liliana axis is not really where Andrew really wants to be. You can try to win a game like that, but you really would rather have some of your powerful sideboard hate.
All right. Well, first one up, there's an Endurance. That is a good one.
That's a good start.
Now, we know there is Grief in Connor's deck. We saw it in game 1. So one hate card isn't guaranteed to work, and this is a hate card that has to remain in hand. It's not like it can preemptively be played onto the board. So a Grief at any point will clear that out of the way.
There's just a Bloodstained Mire passing of the turn, no turn 1 discard. We do see Lightning Bolt among the other cards kept in Andrew's hand, maybe respecting some of the beatdown plan, and also can double up as, a little bit of extra pressure. If you play like a turn 2 Tarmogoyf, back it up by some Lightning Bolts, you can get the job done actually surprisingly fast. So make fun of Jund for how slow and grindy it is, but, Tarmogoyf, the card's been good for many years for a reason. It gets really big, really quick. And so we'll see exactly how Andrew pieces together a plan here. We'll see if he wants to try to use overwhelming amounts of hate, or if he's just going to try to get the game over early. Both, I think, reasonable approaches to the matchup here. As we are thinking about Curator of Mysteries, here comes Grief pitching Living End. Those extra Living Ends kind of getting able to be used. I'm sorry, they kind of get some equity out of Grief now that Grief is included in the deck. And that's kind of a cool little thing that Connor's been able to leverage both of these games.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we see here Andrew kept a 2-land hand with Tarmogoyf, Endurance, Bolt, and Seasoned Pyromancer. Endurance, unsurprisingly, goes away. So fetch here, and then we'll likely see the Tarmogoyf come down, so at least Andrew can start a clock. Tarmogoyf, not going to be too big right now, but Bolt can grow it, like you were saying. Bolt in combination with Tarmogoyf does get things going pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the Seasoned Pyromancer actually could do some amount of work too if like other card types are drawn or what have you. Not only does it put more bodies into play, but can put more card types in the graveyard for the first attack for Tarmogoyf. Andrew does need a land to make that happen, but there is a cohesive plan here with Andrew's hand, and we will see if it is good enough to get the job done here against Living In post Grief.
Yep, Zyator's Proving Ground once again. I imagine, well, we can check, but we already saw deck list, but I didn't look too carefully at the lands. I imagine a lot of decks are running one Triome.
I believe 1 is the number, yes. You can always use it as like the little cycle combination with Wrenn and Six. Just keep picking it up every turn, using it with Wrenn and Six to actually just draw potentially a different card, like a non-land card, every single turn. Or you can fetch it early on turn 1 if you don't have a turn 1 play like we see here, and make your mana a little bit better. I think that's a fine inclusion and a reasonable pickup from Streets of New Capenna.
Yeah, all right. So potentially picking up a red source here to combine with the Seasoned Pyromancer. Yep, there it is. Blood Crypt. All right. Andrew take a couple damage. That's not significant here. And just get a clock moving. As we saw last game, the lack of a clock mattered as Connor had a number of turns to draw into the Shardless Agent, which he eventually did.
Yeah, it's funny to see. You mentioned life total not really mattering. Like a lot of Magic games are kind of dictated on 2 axes, right? Like you're either winning on card advantage or you're winning with life totals. And this matchup really isn't about either of those things. It's only about graveyards from Connor's side. And that's why the Living In deck is so unique. That's what makes the Living In deck so powerful. And it just fights on this very unique axis. And here comes Tarmogoyf as a 2/3 to try to get the life total part done for Connor. So life total kind of matters for Connor. Not terribly relevant for Andrew, like you mentioned, as we picked up a Swamp featuring the new art from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. 3 mana here. Seasoned Pyromancer going to be played off the top, discarding the Lightning Bolt and a land that will grow the Tarmogoyf by 1 different type and make a 1/1. So a little bit of an increased clock here, like we mentioned. 2 more cards coming. And I think the best draw here, Endurance plus green card. Set up for turn 3 to have that free interaction.
All right, we saw for a moment the players were considering using the Piper Powell tokens. That would have been the first time we've seen it on camera this weekend. Those were given out to every entrant this weekend in celebration of Piper Powell having won the Season 1 Showdown. I do like the way this turned out. It's pretty cool. All right, Tarmogoyf across for 3 damage here.
Tarmogoyf going to get it done. Let's see. All right, we see... Looks like the goods in Connor's hand. We got Street Wraith if we want to reach for it. We got the Living In at instant speed if we want to reach for it. Looks like we have a Force, but no blue card. So maybe, here we go. Instead of going for it on Andrew's turn, where we could see a Riveteer's Charm in response, going to go ahead and just jam that on the main phase. Don't get blown out by anything here. And going to put the Living In on the stack. We'll see if he wants to hold priority and cycle this Street Wraith or not. I imagine he probably does.
I would think. You imagine you probably don't? I would think you would.
Oh, he does. He does want to cycle it. I can maybe see an argument for not cycling because I think he has 2 of his Living Ends already accounted for. I think there's 1 in hand maybe and then 1 in exile. So if you draw it, it might be a blowout. So it might be worth it to wait. Not necessarily sure.
Yeah. Well, no, waiting for it to go on the stack absolutely makes sense. But yeah, I don't imagine you pass turn without casting it at all. As you are, I mean, that is a 3-power Swamp Walker in this matchup. Now, Swamp Walk doesn't matter too much when Andrew's going to lose his whole board, but he could rebuild it somewhat. Although I don't think there's too many cards in Andrew's hand either.
There's not. There wouldn't be an endurance coming, it looks like. And an additional Tarmogoyf might do enough. Like, this is a fairly modest Living In. But like you said, the Swamp Walk is actually going to be really relevant here as far as, modest Living Ins go, just because, they can't be blocked. So there's a Tarmogoyf doesn't allow you to actually block those things.
Yeah. Okay. So there is endurance coming back to play for Andrew, who will choose to target a player. And Connor points out, this Violent Outburst is actually still on the stack. That was the grief going off. Endurance looks like it shuffled neither graveyard back.
Fury as the draw. Don't have a 5th land for that one quite yet, but that could threaten to take out one of the Street Wraiths, given you draw a land off the top to cast it. Does have access to a single chump block, I think, on the Curator of Mysteries. I do believe that card's a 4/4. Grief has Menace, and the other two have Swamp Walk. So these new creatures having these evasive abilities
Yeah.
actually going to do a lot to go around this endurance that was brought back.
Mm-hmm. So this is, looks like
Crunch.
no blocking potentially here. Maybe Endurance wants to chump the Curator, but what is that, 13?
I think you have to block if
Yeah,
you
kind of.
intend to
Well,
live.
I guess.
Oh,
Well,
how about this?
okay.
How about pump them up? This might be lethal.
It would be. If there's no blocking here, this would be 17. As Violent Outburst goes and looks for a living end that it will not be casting.
I love this alternate mode, the trumpet blast mode of
Yeah.
Violent Outburst, as Garfield intended, I would say.
Yeah. And Andrew's like, yeah, let's go pick it up. Get your living end, kill all your creatures. Get me back in this game.
I'm going to
Connor,
elect not to cast that one. Andrew
yeah,
says, are you
and
sure?
that's
All right,
it.
fine. I concede.
You called that one that Andrew did indeed need to block. Although if he had, I don't think he would have survived the turn, but not the game, most likely. So Connor Mullaly will grab that one. Andrew did mulligan for a sideboard card, but Grief was able to take care of the endurance and clear the road, and that was all it took.
Exactly. And look, I mean, I think this is a great case study in the power of living end despite hate, right? A lot of players are very scared to play combo decks and stuff like that when there's a target on their back, right? Like if you look at that Jund list just on paper and you're like considering playing living end of the weekend, you're like, okay, well, I don't know. I don't want to play against this guy. He's got the works. He's got a variety of different stuff. It's all good against me. Some of it's free, some of it's 2 mana. Like it's all over the place. I can't beat that. But in execution, your decks that are powerful that have plans for different interaction stuff, and also, I mean, there's some stuff that you just can't beat. Like if Andrew's 2 cards there were endurance plus green card, Connor's in a lot of trouble, but that's not the case. And at the end of the day, having this proactive strategy that can come in and beat the hate is very real. We got to see that happen on from Connor Mullaly there against Andrew.